On this point of psychotherapy not being perfectly designed for men, I was watching a clip before you arrived where a lady who's an author of a book that's just come out said that talking about our problems makes them worse. And I was wondering if that's true.
It can be. So I think this is a big problem, is that talking about our problems can absolutely make things worse. So let's understand a couple of things. So the first is that there's this assumption that talking about your problems makes them better. But there are actually very specific things that need to happen in order for talking about your problems to make things better. The most important thing is something called an emotional catharsis. So this is where you have like a breakthrough in therapy. So there's like this moment where there's a lot of dormant stuff, and Freud even described this, where you have this moment of very, very intense emotion that is relatively new. Or, I mean, it's kind of dormant, but it's not like venting. We'll get to venting in a second. And so there's a particular way we have to talk about problems that triggers emotional catharsis. Emotional catharsis creates something called like a breakthrough. So this is also like an experience. So this is not just talking about my problems. This is experiencing my problems in a different way. So it's kind of like touching the hot pan. Mm-hmm. Usually it's kind of painful. So when we're doing like work with a trauma survivor, we don't want to just talk about the trauma. We want to sort of dig into it a little bit more and have an emotionally healing experience. The real problem is that sometimes what will happen is people will just talk about their problems. So they'll use therapy as essentially like a venting session. And venting, if we look at kind of the neuroscience of venting, venting is useful for reducing our negative emotion in the moment. But this is the really tricky thing. If we kind of think about it, like I'll ask you, maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but why do we have negative emotions, Stephen?
It's a signal.
For what?
I would guess that depends on the negative emotion, but I guess it's a signal that is there to help us connect with people.
Oh, okay, so I think it can be, sure.
Loneliness.
Loneliness is a great example of a signal that's designed to connect with you. What about something like anger or fear? Why do we have fear?
To warn us against impending danger?
Absolutely, right? So if I'm like running through the jungle and I see a tiger and I have fear, fear gives us information, and what else does it do?
Gives us a physiological energy and
very good.
Adrenaline.
Absolutely. For what purpose?
To flee.
Absolutely. So this is a big thing that people don't understand. The primary motivator for change is actually negative energy, a negative emotion. So this is the problem with venting. If you vent and get rid of all of your negative emotional energy, the drive to change will disappear. So if we kind of think about it, what motivates you the most? It's actually negative emotion. And you can literally look at the neuroanatomy of things like the amygdala. So the amygdala is very close to the hippocampus, which is where learning and memory happen. So we actually learn the most through negative emotions. So if I've been happily married for 15 years and there's infidelity, right? One case of infidelity, the negative emotion from that one case of infidelity can drastically motivate me. So one of the biggest problems that I see is that we try to get rid of our negative emotions, and in doing so, we actually hamstring our motivational capability. So I've seen this a lot where people will come in and they'll go through like what they think therapy is, which is like, actually same guy, Mike, came in and he'd like kind of talk about his problems. And I was like, Mike, is this helping? So I was still a trainee at the time. So he'd been seeing me for about 6 to 8 months. And I was like, you come in here and you kind of talk about your problems, but like you don't seem to be getting better. I didn't know how to do therapy at the time. And then he's like, isn't that what I'm supposed to do, is come in and talk about my problems? I was like, yeah, I think so. I was a second-year psychiatry resident, but I was like, is this helping? He's like, no. And I was like, okay, we got to do something else then. Coming in and just venting is not actually psychotherapy. That's not like, so talking about your problems, reducing your negative emotional energy can actually keep you stuck. And if you pay attention to people in your life, you'll notice that there are some people who just like bitch all the time, right? They're just like constantly complaining, they're constantly venting, and they don't actually do anything to change their life.
It's interesting because with the advent of social media, you now get reinforced by deficiency promotion, I call it. There's kind of these two types of ways that you can build an audience or a personal brand. One of them is idea promotion. These are my ideas. This is how I think about something. And the other that's emerged, which is really interesting and a little bit toxic, is like deficiency promotion. These are all the ways that I'm broken. These are all the ways that I'm inadequate. And you can build an entire audience around that which resonate with your inadequacies. And then that inadequacy, that you get held there because that's the speaking appointments you get booked to do. That's what your book's about. Your book is about all the ways you're broken and flawed, all the stuff you've been through. And then it becomes your profession. And I watched that play out so many times. I'm like, I talk to my friends about it. I'm like, be careful of deficiency promotion because you might accidentally build a revenue stream there and then you're fucked.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we see is that there's a lot of empathic resonance, right? So, and I think in some ways that's a good thing. So I think when I'm a broken human being, there are a lot of broken other human beings. The problem is when you're a broken human being, you don't feel like you're a part of society. You're like broken and everyone else is out there living their lives and being positive. And so it can feel so relieving to connect with someone else, to realize, oh my God, I'm not alone, right? So I think with some of these deficiency promotion, and we see that a lot in like psychotherapy groups on trauma and stuff like that, where there's a lot of like trauma bonding, and there's also some weird ego there with like, I'm more broken than you and my trauma is worse than you, a lot of toxic comparison. There's a lot of stuff that can kind of go awry. But I think there's absolutely a reason why that's a way that you can build your brand, because there are a lot of people out there who feel broken and feel alone. And I'd rather be broken and with someone than broken and alone.
It's all about belonging at the end of the day.
Yeah.
All of these things are about, feeling like you belong.
Absolutely.